Rain lashed the shop windows, creating a rhythmic yet chaotic symphony. Clara, seeking refuge from the storm, pushed open the antique shop door with a sense of urgency. The musty scent of old wood and forgotten things filled her nostrils, evoking memories of times long past. She stepped inside, intrigued by the jumble of objects that seemed to whisper stories of their own. Her gaze swept over dusty furniture, faded portraits and shelves overflowing with trinkets, each item a relic of a bygone era. In the dimly lit corner something shimmered, catching her eye with an almost magnetic pull.
What could that be, she wondered, her curiosity piqued.
Clara, drawn by an unseen force, walked towards the shimmering object, her steps slow and deliberate. A chill settled in the air around her. The scent of rain intensified, now carrying a metallic tang that seemed almost foreboding. She reached the corner and stopped, her breath catching in her throat as she took in the sight before her. Before her stood an ornately carved mirror, its surface reflecting an unnatural light that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The mirror was taller than Clara, its frame crafted from dark, polished wood. It stood like a silent sentinel in the dimly lit room, its presence both commanding and ominous. Intricate carvings depicting writhing figures and grotesque faces adorned its edges. Each figure seemed to tell a story of anguish and torment, their eyes following Clara as she moved. But it was the mirror's surface that held Clara captive. The reflection it offered was not her own. Instead, it showed a world that was eerily familiar yet disturbingly different.
This isn't right. What is happening?
It shimmered, rippled, like water disturbed by an unseen hand. The surface seemed alive, as if it were breathing, waiting for something or someone. A sense of unease prickled Clara's skin. She took a hesitant step back, but the strange allure of the mirror held her gaze. It was as if the mirror had a will of its own, drawing her in. The reflection shifted, and for a fleeting moment Clara saw a glimpse of her own face. But it was wrong, twisted into an expression of utter despair. Her eyes, usually full of life, were now hollow and filled with sorrow. Panic swelled in Clara's chest, a cold fist clenching around her heart. She tried to look away, to move, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. The reflection in the mirror was no longer even vaguely human. It writhed. A mass of darkness shot through with streaks of crimson and silver.
Look at me, child. See what you fear most.
Clara squeezed her eyes shut, but the voice echoed in her mind. When she opened her eyes, the mirror showed her a scene from her past, a memory she had tried to bury deep within. The mirror reflected her deepest regret, a moment of weakness that had haunted her ever since. It played out before her eyes, every detail vivid, the accompanying emotions amplified. Shame and fear washed over her, threatening to drown her.
We all have our secrets, child, the things we hide from the world and from ourselves.
Clara's reflection in the mirror reached out, its hand a grotesque parody of her own, long, skeletal fingers tipped with curved claws.
No.
Clara stumbled back, tearing her gaze from the horrifying spectacle. She spun around, desperate to escape the mirror's hold. But the shop seemed to have grown smaller, the walls closing in, each surface now reflecting the distorted, flickering light of the cursed mirror.
You cannot hide from yourself, child. Your fears, your regrets, they are a part of you.
Clara's hand brushed against a small, heavy object on a nearby shelf. A statuette. Hope flared briefly in her chest. Clara grabbed the statuette, her fingers trembling as they closed around the cold, hard surface. The weight of it felt reassuring in her hand, a small anchor in the storm of her emotions. She turned back to the mirror, her fear momentarily forgotten in a surge of desperate anger. Her reflection stared back at her, twisted and malevolent, mocking her every move.
Leave me alone, she screamed, her voice echoing in the confined space.
She screamed, hurling the statuette at the mirror's surface with all her might, her desperation fueling her strength. The statuette connected with a sickening crunch, the sound reverberating through the room. The mirror shattered, exploding outwards in a shower of shards, each piece catching the dim light as it flew. From the depths of the shattered mirror, shadowy figures surged, twisting and writhing, before being sucked back into the broken fragments, their forms dissolving into the darkness. Clara collapsed to her knees, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her face as the weight of what had just happened settled over her. The shop was silent now, the air thick with the smell of ozone and a lingering sense of wrongness. The rain had stopped, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. Clara, picking herself up, knew that the curse of the mirror, though broken, would linger, waiting. The shadows had retreated, but their presence was still felt, a dark promise of their return.